like to invite our first speaker to come.
So do you not want the White House in the background?
Would you like to? Not that.
What would be the best shot then?
Well, I have to be face down.
Sorry, Gamina.
I'd like to call up the first speaker.
When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do?
Act up, fight back!
Oh, sorry, my bad.
All right, act up, fight back! We're going to welcome up our first speaker of the day. We have Fari Gamina Tumpe, and she is from Spaces in Action.
Thank you. Jambo Buana, everyone. And if you're not from D.C., welcome to Washington, D.C.
Thank you!
Again, I'm Fari Gamina Tumpe, a community builder with Spaces in Action. Healthcare hero with Spaces in Action. But I shouldn't have to be a healthcare hero. I'd like to begin with the land acknowledgement. I invite you to take note of this solid ground beneath your feet. I'd like to honor the original stewards and custodians of this land upon which you stand. The Pamunkey, the Piscataway, and the Anacostan Indians. I'd like to honor all of our wise and bright ancestors. I especially want to pay tribute today to a gentleman named Michael Shower. 35 years ago, Michael Shower, an employee at the United Nations with about 40 other gay men who worked at the United Nations in New York, started World AIDS Day. This morning, as I spoke with one of my dear friends, and I shared the flyer widely within my community, he called me. He said Michael Shower was my best friend. Michael Shower lost his battle with AIDS in 1995. But he said as they sat in that conference room at the United Nations, Michael said, now this is a gay disease, but in years to come, this will be a global pandemic. And here we are. I honor Michael Shower for his vision and his valor, and he is why we stand here celebrating World AIDS Day today. I would also like to acknowledge my executive director at Spaces in Action, LaDon Love, and my teammates who are here, TJ Terrence James is here with me as well, and my dearest friend, Albert Garcia, who is always my right-hand man. I want to talk a little bit about the fact that nothing impacts, transforms, and informs our lives more than stories. Storytelling has shifted the narrative as we're doing here today. And so I want to share a little bit about my family's bout with this systemic pandemic. I lost my father during COVID, a man who served over 3 decades in the United States Army, died alone. That in itself is a disgrace and a disservice. No one should have to die alone. We were able to give him a beautiful military funeral, but he suffered for months before his demise. And so this is why this event is so important to me. I'd also like to share with you my middle son's story. And it is appropriate that I share his story today because today is his 36th birthday. But he almost didn't live to see it. My son was ushered into the emergency room 6 times within 3 weeks for nausea, fatigue, chest pain, high blood pressure, low oxygen. Normal oxygen levels are between 96 and 100. His was down to 70. And also an excessive heart rate. And still, he was discharged from the emergency room 6 times before being treated for COVID pneumonia. He was treated for 7 days at George Washington University Hospital and discharged, only to be readmitted 3 days later to discover that he had a pulmonary embolism, blood clots in his lungs, which could have very well killed my son. But he stands here today as a result of us hiring a holistic physician, because our healthcare system is fucked up. Our healthcare system is fucked up.
Talk about it.
So we went to a holistic doctor and he changed his lifestyle. He's now a vegan and makes me drink alkaline water and all these things to keep us here. But we keep us safe. Let me hear you say it. We keep us safe.
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 Say no more disparities.
No more disparity.
Where's your moral clarity?
Where's your moral clarity?
Answer the call.
Answer the call.
Health care for all.
Health care for all.
No more disparities.
No more disparity.
Where's your moral clarity?
Where's your moral clarity?
Answer the call.
Answer the call.
Health care for all.
Health care for all.
And so, in closing, I want to share our bold ask from Spaces in Action. We are asking that you renew the PHE, the public health emergency, in the U.S. beyond January 2023, which has expanded much-needed health care coverage and access to free testing and vaccines. Lifting the emergency declaration could cause up to 15 million people to lose coverage during a surging pandemic.
We can't do that. That happened.
Please don't take us off Medicare. Please extend the PHE. And now I want you to say with me in closing, Biden and Congress, our lives are in your hands. We need you.
Congress, our lives are in your hands.
We need you to fund pandemic plan.
I need you to fund pandemic plans.
Biden and Congress, our lives are in your hands.
We need you to fund pandemic plans.
Yes.
Biden and Congress, our lives are in your hands. We need you to fund pandemic plans. Biden and Congress, our lives are in your hands. We need you to fund pandemic plans. Asante Sana, thank you very much.
Thank you, Spaces in Action. Give it up, please. Our next speaker is Victor from Act Up New York. Please come up, Victor.
Hello? Hi. Hello. Hello, my name is Victor. I'm a member of Act Up New York. I'm just going to go into it. New York City was one of the epicenters of the Mpox outbreak. And Mpox and COVID have exposed inequalities in our healthcare system and weaknesses in the collective response to an epidemic. Unlike COVID, there was already a vaccine for Mpox. there was already medication for Mpox. All the technology that was necessary to confront this epidemic was there when it began, but it turns out that the US government was not ready to go at all. We can remember all the vaccines, hundreds of thousands of vaccines that were left in Denmark to waste when this epidemic began. There was a total lack of preparation for Pride events in late June when this had already started in May. And there was inaccessibility for treatment of TPOXX. Back when there was... Okay. Yes, thank you. Anyways, we also saw how the rollout of the response to the epidemic was very inequitable racially. We saw inequality in action as white people took the majority of the vaccinations, while people of color took on a disproportionate amount of the virus. There was inequality in the distribution of TPOXX and the prescription of TPOXX. We saw that the medication was given more frequently to white people than to people of color. And then we saw the incredible switch from subcutaneous to intradermal vaccination, which caused a great loss of confidence in the whole vaccination program. Rather than pulling the stops out on manufacturing, rather than pulling the stops out on pressuring Bavarian Nordic to increase the distribution of vaccination in the U.S., we decided to switch to a rationing system, which ultimately has caused a lot of people to question whether or not they should get the vaccine because of keloid scarring, which is racist. And the worst impact, of course, though, was on people with HIV. All the severe manifestations of Mpox, ones which resulted in hospitalization, ones which resulted in amputations of limbs, and ones which resulted ultimately in death, happened most frequently in people with HIV, people with compromised immune systems, people who did not even know that they had HIV until this happened. So we can see the catastrophe of epidemics colliding. And then there's, of course, the global context. You know, this is an epidemic here in the U.S., but it was quote-unquote endemic in other countries in Africa. And we have to wonder, you know, why is it that we get the vaccines and there are other countries that don't have access to vaccines? What are the intellectual property restrictions in the way of preventing everyone on Earth from getting the health care that they deserve? And in conclusion, I'm just glad to see that people are here today. People are here outside the White House to make a stand for health care for all. And what's going to happen here is not going to stay here. You know, we're going to take this event, we're going to take on this organizing, and we're going to bring it back to our homes all over the country.
All right, Victor.
And then we're gonna win in the end.
Woo!
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Gabriel.
Huh?
Gabriel.
Hi, I'm Gabriel Sanemeterio, and I am the co-founder of Strategies for High Impact and its network for long COVID justice. I'm grateful to be here with the communities that I'm a part of and that I hold dearly, which are people living with HIV and people living with illnesses that have a viral trigger, such as myalgic encephalomyelitis, or ME/CFS, and long COVID.
That's right.
Today is the 34th year that we commemorate World AIDS Day. AIDS Day, yeah. But the HIV/AIDS pandemic started long before mainstream society, and the government considered it a problem that our siblings were dying. In fact, it took literal blood, sweat, and tears from so many activists who put their bodies on the line and who gave their ashes after their untimely deaths to have resources dedicated to research and systems of care. Tragically, despite having effective medical treatments and prevention methods, people are still dying of AIDS today. Here in the United States and across the world, these deaths are distributed unevenly across socioeconomic, racial, and gender lines, which means that the most affected are black and brown people who have low incomes or live in abject poverty and are minoritized and marginalized due to their sexuality and or gender identity. Today, many decades after AIDS started killing us, we are in the crosshairs of colliding pandemics. And though they're very different, there's no comparing AIDS and COVID. Both viruses have killed millions, continue to kill children, teenagers, adults, and elders here in the US and across the world. Regardless of what demographic you fall under, post-viral illness can happen to you. HIV positive people are actually 4 times more likely to develop long COVID than their seronegative counterparts. Long COVID is an umbrella term that includes hundreds of symptoms, often disabling and sometimes deadly, that appear after a COVID-19 infection. Regardless of severity, even mild or asymptomatic COVID infections can result in long COVID. More than half of the people who develop long COVID meet the diagnostic criteria for myalgic encephalomyelitis, or ME/CFS. As a genderqueer Mexican immigrant, I embody many of the intersecting identities that produce negative health outcomes and disability. I live at the intersection of pandemics. My ME was likely triggered by the impact of contracting HIV, but it's hard to know because ME has been neglected, stigmatized, underfunded, and under-researched for decades. My HIV diagnosis happened quickly, and it gave me access to what should be basic human rights, such as access to treatment, healthcare, housing, and other services. On the other hand, it took 9 years for me to get my ME diagnosis, and while my HIV was well managed, ME took away my ability to work and radically changed my life. By the way, there are no FDA-approved treatments for ME, and there are only a handful of medical professionals who specialize in it. Many of them are rapidly approaching retirement age. After getting COVID just once, and despite vaccinations and treatment with Paxlovid, my ME got worse. Rates of ME/CFS are skyrocketing due to long COVID. Sadly, my story is not unique. Millions of people have been living with ME, many of whom are severely disabled, whether they have a diagnosis or not. And now millions more are living with or developing long COVID. Both pandemics are far from over, and their disabling effects linger in our bodies. As one of the most prosperous nations in the history of the world, we need the President and Congress to fund research, treatment, and strategies globally to address pandemics now and to prevent future ones. International solidarity is non-negotiable. We are all interconnected. The health of the people on the other side of the world affects us too. Thank you.
Woo! Thank you to Strategies for High Impact and Long COVID Justice and every other organization and network that has anchored not just this mobilization off-site and in person, but every other act, every other demand during the decades of the AIDS crisis, the 2.5 years of the COVID pandemic, the ongoing endemicity of Mpox around the world. There's an outbreak in parts of the world, but in West and Central Africa, Mpox has been endemic for 50 years, and there hasn't been focus or attention or equitable distribution of resources, as Victor mentioned, for every community that has stood up and fought together, whether communities invisibilize living with ME, CFS, or other complex chronic conditions. We're here not just to say shame on President Biden, but also to celebrate the leadership and the victory that has brought us to the place that we have been, because we know we will fight to win, but we also know that any death is unacceptable, any disability is unacceptable, but we know it would have been so much worse if our elders and our leaders and all of us had not stood up and would not continue to stand up to fight for what's right.
We're not expendable.
We are not expendable, we are not disposable, and we will fight until we win. So So our next speaker before we close, and we will not rest in peace.
That's right.
We will not rest in peace. There are 38.4 million people living with HIV today, and their immune compromised state, many of them put them at increased risk of multiple colliding pandemics. And we will not stop fighting until we've won health justice for all of our communities. Our next speaker is Jasmine.
Woo!
Is Jasmine Henderson
Of Act Up Philly.
of Act Up Philadelphia.
Woo! Woo! When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do?
Act up, fight back.
When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do?
Act up, fight back.
What do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
Hi, my name is Jasmine Henderson. I'm an organizer with Act Up Philadelphia and the Black and Brown Latinx, the Black and Latinx Community Control. On World AIDS Day, unlike most people, Act Up has never been one to just hold these meaningless celebrations over a pandemic that's not cured yet. So hanging a red ribbon, having a dinner or lunch or whatever else, handing out rewards, that's not our style, right? So it only makes sense that we're here today with HealthGap and all these other organizations to remind the Biden administration and Congress that HIV is not gone. AIDS is not over, and therefore we should not be celebrating.
Period. That's right.
In the middle of this time when we have at least three pandemics that are converging upon us, and those are just the medical ones. You know, we haven't talked about the opioid addiction that's happening. We haven't talked about a housing crisis that's going on. You know, we haven't talked about any of that stuff, which all exasperate the problems of these pandemics that we're seeing now. Because if there's one thing we know, it's that if you have housing and you have health care, every other medical issue that you could be going through will be so much easier to deal with. But for some reason or another, the people that we put into power seem to lack the knowledge that we all know is just sanity in keeping us safe, in keeping us well. And we all know why that is, right? We can sit here and pretend like we don't know why, but at the end of the day, all it is farm and greed. And what it is we don't have the billions of dollars to be sitting in Congress lobbying people to pay for what we want, right? Right? We know every one of those lobbyists, from Pfizer to the people who developed the monkeypox vaccine, every single one of them are in there like, no, you can't get this away. No, we can't do universal health care, because if we do universal health care, then I can't have my second yacht, or I can't have my third summer home, right? Like, we're just trying to survive, and they're worried about these extra luxuries. And it's not right. It's not fair, and it definitely doesn't show a government that's supposed to represent the people. What it shows is a government that represents greed. And that's what this country has always stood for. And as usual, the fight to fix this is on the backs of black and brown people, queer folk, and trans folk. Because we're always the ones who have to step in and get the changes that we need. We can't wait on them. And it's gotten to the point where we have to remember that Democrats just barely squeaked out with control of the Senate. Lost control of the House. Why? Because their policies. Because they don't stand up for us. But yet they want us to get up and stand for them for hours every 2 years or every year to vote for these things. And we're getting to the point where we are wising up. So instead of voting for people who don't do nothing for you, remember, we're the leaders. We're the ones who understand what's going on. And them telling us that it's not our time should be fueling us to be the ones who are out there asking for the vote and out there trying to be in control. Because if we ran the government, imagine what we could do. Right? If the government was run by people like us, imagine the differences that we would make. We wouldn't be out here having a protest for stuff that should be common sense. we wouldn't still be 40 years later just trying to get a wage that makes it so that we can live. We have people dying every day, and every single one of these deaths are preventable, either through universal health care, housing as a human right, or just simple caring from a government that says that it promised us the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have none of those things. We've never had any of those things. It's all been an illusion. So I say it's time we open our eyes and we take what's given, what's promised to us, and we stop waiting.
Thank you, Jasmine. Our final speaker is Harrison Farina from the Put People First collective in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. My name is Harrison Farina. I'm an organizer with Put People First PA, and I co-coordinate our Southeast Pennsylvania Healthcare Rights Committee. In our 10 years of organizing across all lines of division in Pennsylvania, we have focused our fight on the struggle for healthcare as a human right. Healthcare is a strategic issue that unites the poor and dispossessed of this nation. That's the 140 million people who are one paycheck away or one healthcare emergency away from poverty and homelessness. That's the growing majority in this country. And we all need healthcare, regardless of your race, your geography, your age, your political party, your gender identity, your sexuality, your religion, your citizenship status. We all have a need for health care.
Yes!
And we know that health care is not a human right in this country. It's not.
Not yet.
That's right, it's not yet. Health care is not a human right in a country with so much abundance. There's abandonment. We have to fight to change that by uniting around a common interest in a healthcare system that puts human life before profit. A healthcare system that puts profit before human life is sick.
It is very sick.
It's sick.
All the doctors.
Yeah, we need doctors. And that's who we are. We're root doctors because we're understanding what's the reason for that. When they can provide us the care that we need right now, why can't we access health care? And we're living in a system where the government is facilitating the murder and robbery of millions of people. COVID has shown us just how much money can be made off our death and sickness. And before COVID, 700 people died every day from poverty. When COVID hit, the wealthiest corporations increased their profits by billions of dollars.
That ain't right!
Those billions of dollars deepened the pockets of the wealthiest individuals instead of providing the care, the treatment, the vaccines, the research that we need.
Health justice now.
That's right. Health justice now. I see all the pain and death, and it doesn't make sense because this system is sick. The COVID pandemic exposed what this system is. And I want to talk about a recent development in the policy of abandonment in a healthcare emergency. I want to talk about the upcoming Medicaid cutoffs, where 15 million people are projected to lose their Medicaid in the new year. This is nothing less than a policy of social murder. When COVID hit, a federal health care emergency was declared, which put in place certain protections. One of them was that states could no longer kick people off Medicaid. We know now that the federal health care emergency is projected to end in mid-April. That's going to create an entirely new health care emergency because 15 million people are projected to lose their health care. Yeah, it's not right.
We can stop it.
And we can't stop it. And I want to talk about how we can stop it.
Expand the PHE!
That's right.
Expand
And the PHE.
Expand the
We need to unite across racial lines, across urban and rural lines, because the 90 million people in this country on Medicaid are united on this. Expand Medicaid.
Right.
We need Medicaid. The pandemic protections to Medicaid are being taken away because we only get what we're organized to take. Anything that we're given can be taken away, and that's what we're seeing.
Gotta take it back.
That's why Put People First PA and the Nonviolent Medicaid Army are organizing around these Medicaid cutoffs. In Pennsylvania alone, 1 million people will lose their Medicaid. That's 83,000 people each month who are going to receive a letter in the mail telling them that their access to health care is gone. That is murder. The need for Medicaid is dire. I want to lift up a story of a leader in Put People First PA. Tammy Rosing from Lancaster County. She got COVID over a year ago and is still dealing with the consequences of long COVID. She told me she feels her brain is forever changed, dealing with COVID fog. This is a serious disease.
Yes, it is.
And we cannot get the care that we need in this current system.
Unacceptable.
It's unacceptable. Rather than funding for research and treatment for crises like COVID, monkeypox, HIV/AIDS, chronic fatigue, that money is being taken from us. Those resources being taken from us to make a few people a lot of money. Tammy is a leader because they are clear enough to know we need to unite and connect across our differences. We need to commit ourselves to a movement to change the system. And we need to build competent political leaders among our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers, our families. So Put People First, we're kicking off an organizing drive starting in January. We're organizing around the Medicaid cutoffs. We're letting people know that they have a right to file an appeal. And we're going to help people file appeals if they're willing to fight not only for themselves, but for their entire class, because that's who leaders are. They fight not just for themselves, but for all of us. Our leaders are not those who allow our pain and illness to be turned into a $1 trillion industry. So check us out online at our website, putpeoplefirstpa.org. We are speaking out and taking action around these Medicaid cutoffs. Forward together, not one step back.
All right. Thank you. While we prepare to wind down, I have one story that was shared by an organizer, someone who could not join us today. And that's someone named Rosie Davis, who is a founder of the Yellow Heart Memorial. It was a memorial that Rosie started, and I want to share her story because some of us could be here together in person, but many other supporters are not able to join and are not able to gather safely, but are watching online and are participating off-site in our call to action, challenging leaders in Congress and President Biden to take the action that we demand. Rosie says, I started a memorial called the Yellow Heart Memorial after losing my mother, Mary Castro, on the 17th of May, 2020 to COVID. The last day I saw my mother's face was on Mother's Day, and 5 days later she lost her battle in a local hospital. I made it my mission to humanize the numbers we hear every day. My mom was amongst the most vulnerable people. She was in a nursing home in the state of Texas where there was no mask mandate. The virus found her, and we had no closure, like so many other families, not only in Texas and the U.S., but around the world. And we never got to say goodbye. But I also had a brother, Ricky Bustamante. He died the 11th of December, 1999. He was in the last stages of AIDS when he took his own life because he couldn't bear the pain and the suffering, but most of all, the stigma from society. He was only 36 when he passed away, and he had his whole life ahead of him. Both he and I had to deal with a Christian family not accepting his lifestyle. My brother was so smart and so loving, and he and I were the closest of the 4 kids. I was devastated when I got the news that he took his life. I knew that he was sick when he was in and out of the hospital. He had sores on his body. He couldn't keep food down, and he was so fragile. I miss our special bond, the bond we had and all the crazy times that we had together. Ricky was born the 6th of September, 1965, and died on December 11th. Our family has suffered tremendous loss, and we miss you. In closing, what I would like to say is that we live in a country that needs to concentrate on the so-called forgotten, the people of color, the less fortunate, the outcast, those with mental health issues, those who are being made invisible. We are not forgetting one another, and we need to stop trying to reinvent what those communities needed, whether it was Ricky living with HIV in 1999, or Rosie's mom facing COVID in a nursing home where policy failures made her vulnerable in Texas in 2020, 2 decades later. This is killing our loved ones, and we need real change. Thank you, Rosie, for that incredibly painful story. This catastrophe that Rosie describes and that we are all experiencing, it is preventable. It was preventable. And we owe a debt to our communities to fight like hell so that the next pandemic that will come next month, next year, is not met with the same playbook of disregard and neglect from this administration and this Congress. So now I'd like you all to join me in being led by those people with that banner over there to a die-in where we will symbolize with our bodies the effect of this administration's criminal neglect in lack of response to the COVID pandemic, to the ongoing 4th decade of the AIDS pandemic, and to Mpox, and to the silent pandemics of complex chronic illnesses that are colliding together. We will not suffer in silence. When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do? Act up, fight back. When people with AIDS are under attack,
Act up, fight back. When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do?
act up, fight back. When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do?
Act up, fight back.
When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do?
Act up, fight back.
When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do?
Act up, fight back.
When people with AIDS are under attack, what do we do?
Act up, fight back.
a moment of silence for a diet. Freeze-dry.
Beat us,
Nope, wherever you want. But maybe with the headstone facing up. Yeah.
Pills cost pennies. Greed costs lives. 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 Pills cost pennies. Greed costs lives.
No health care, no peace.
No healthcare, no peace. No healthcare, no peace. No healthcare, no peace. No healthcare, no peace. No healthcare, no peace. No healthcare, no peace. No healthcare, no peace. No healthcare, no peace. No healthcare, no peace.
Healthcare matters.
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 The people united will never be divided. The people united will never be divided. The people united will never be divided. The people united will never be divided.
We know as this World AIDS Day comes to a close that our struggle to fight for health justice for 40 million people living with HIV around the world, literally hundreds of millions of people whose lives have been affected by long COVID, and countless more who are struggling in response to the pandemic neglect of this administration. We know we will never stop fighting. We will never stop fighting until we realize the vision of health justice embodied in funding and policies and human rights that protect us in the United States and around the world. We will not stop fighting until we have won full funding for pandemic plans, an investment in the mRNA hub that has the power to transform access to medical countermeasures in sub-Saharan Africa and around the world, so that our brothers and sisters in the global south are not gripped by the stranglehold of pharmaceutical industry greed that has so undermined the fight against COVID, against HIV, against Mpox. We won't stop fighting until we demand from this administration and Congress a blueprint to confront long COVID and associated diseases that truly centers the human rights and the health justice demands of our communities. We refuse for these visions to be divided, and we will proudly stand together until we win, because we know 4 decades ago, when queer, Black and brown and drug-using communities had the bravery to stand up against a virus that the Reagan administration openly derided and mocked, that we stand in their shoes, fighting for pandemic justice, no matter who you are, who you love, or where you live. We know we will win. And when we kick the shit out of the system that generated this pandemic, we know we'll be alive and stronger together to kick the shit out of the system that'll generate the next pandemic. Because we have the strength and the vision to do so. And we will hold our leaders accountable until we succeed. Act up! Fight back! Fight AIDS! Act up! Fight back! Fight AIDS! Act up! Fight back! Fight AIDS! Act up! Fight AIDS! Act up! Fight back! 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 Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, so much for coming. That is the conclusion. Signs that you don't want to take, you can bring them over to me.
Oh, thank goodness. I'm so glad I'm ready for last night.
Thank you so much. Yeah.